Hey, awesome listeners. Before we dive into today's episode, I've got a small request. If you're enjoying the podcast, could you take just a moment to go and rate and review it on whatever podcast platform you're using? It costs nothing, it takes a brief moment, but it really means the world to us. Your feedback helps other people discover the show, so if you can hit that review button, share your thoughts. It's quick, it's free, but it really does make a huge difference to what we're doing. Now let's jump into today's episode.
You're listening to the Forest School podcast with Lewis Ames and Gemma Southerden.
It does not get it.
Oh. Is it too cold to talk?
Is it too cold to talk?
It's not too cold to talk, is it?
No. I don't think so.
But it is cold.
It's very rainy.
It's
well,
rainy.
I'm extra cold because I wasn't anticipating coming in straight in today, so I'm in jeans and barefoot shoes, which are all of about 2 millimeters thick. You're in your nice boots.
I'm in my boots, but I've still got really cold feet. And yeah, and it's cold. It's cold and damp.
You said yesterday,
dark.
This is winter.
It
was a
hit.
revelation to you. You just
yeah.
went, Lewis, this is winter. Yep.
It was because it was like a mind and body memory. Like it was like a sense and brain perception thing, or an oh yeah, this is what it's like for like 6 months, and then you were like, not 6 months, but it is. I'm afraid to tell you, it's 6 months.
I think
it's like
it was
November, December, January, February, March, April, May. Yeah, it's not 7 months. I'm afraid of this. Naked trees, you can see out of the forest, so it feels like, ooh, I'm a bit in a goldfish bowl.
Somebody's turned this on, having a real mardy
time.
week, and they've gone, do you know what? Those guys are a real
Happy.
laugh. They're real
Happy
cheery.
times.
Guess what, guys?
It's
Darkness
winter.
is coming.
I was in a better mood when I drove in this morning.
Yeah,
I was
because you were
listening-
blaring like happy hardcore when you arrived. Got out of the car like a little forest gnome.
Look, let's play a bit for
No,
the
because
listeners.
we'll get in.
What?
I won't like it.
Yeah, just look. Listen. Oh no, I don't want slamming ragga, and I don't want. No, hang on. Look. Yes.
Okay, stop it.
See, but
If
no,
you're
you
worried-
feel better now. I feel so much better now. Like I.
Weirdly,
it's
you never
winter.
seem older than when you play me music. But there's something about your music is very like childish,
Old.
rave culture-y,
Yeah.
and there's something about you being in like essentially a people carrier, but turning up with that music like, yeah, I'm doing it. Okay, you've got 4 car seats in your car, Gemma. There's crisps under the seat.
Yeah, but I'm not trying to be cool. It genuinely makes me happy. If I was trying to be cool, I definitely wouldn't do that. But now, like, my heart's beating faster. I'm smiling.
Oh, there we go.
Happy.
If it works for you.
There you go. That's what everyone needs to do before recording a podcast. Listen to a bit of Venetian snares.
I go the other way. I have to listen to any of the like
Classical music.
lo-fi hip hop. You know, they're like
Yeah.
because my children are very small and very noisy,
Yeah.
and what they want is consistent and everything. So to just be like, there is music, and it requires like none of my attention.
Yeah.
Eric, I was telling my wife about Eric Satie, who invented furniture music in Paris, which he was like the first person to come up with music that he didn't want you to listen to.
It was just on the background.
In the background, because up until then it was like music's so rare that the fact that someone was playing it live, you would be like, I must sit, and this is costly, and this is a rarity, so you'd listen to it. He also had 2 grand pianos, one on top of the other, so that in his apartment in Paris.
But his neighbours were pleased.
Mental. I think he was in that pre-war, like, everyone take all the, do you want some heroin from the corner shop kind of era.
Oh yeah, that brigade. What? I don't know about that brigade.
Like, like pre-World War One, there was a thing where they would it was like a care package you could send to your, like, someone you knew who was on the front.
Right.
And it was like a bit of morphine,
Right.
some cocaine, a little bit of heroin if they want, like
Really?
it was opiates, I think, were big.
Yeah.
It was, I think it's called like the Great Binge or something. It's like a period of history. Loads of art, music came out of it. Loads of romantic poetry. all this stuff.
Right.
Have we cheered people up now? From telling...
Happy days.
So the
Happy
end
days.
of that little rant is, if you're sad about winter, get yourself some opiates.
Get yourself some opiates. Listen to some rave music.
Don't.
Yes.
Or don't.
Do
Are we
whatever you
That's
need.
fine.
Do whatever
Do
you need.
whatever you need. What are we talking about?
Today we are talking about an author called Ross W. Greene, PhD. And I have read for the third time The Explosive Child, a new approach for understanding and parenting easily frustrated, chronically inflexible children. And you have read...
I have read Lost and Found. I can't remember what the subtitle, tagline bit is, but it is his third book. So The Explosive Child was first. And then I think he wrote the second one is Lost in School.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then this one, Lost and Found, is about not necessarily school settings, although spoiler, it's definitely about school settings.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of tying together bits. So he seems like, I really like this when authors put out a piece of work or like a system, and then maybe this is just how they stay in money. But they then, like, in a couple of years go like, here's the feedback I've got from more people who tried it.
Yeah.
And they do that. And then, so Lost and Found is, like, as far as I'm aware, his most recent version of, like, I've taken on board stuff. This is what I recommend now. And I quite like that about adaptive practice. I think anything like this kind of system of looking at behaviour, because it is mostly looking at behaviour and needs. But I think anything that you don't update needs to go in the bin quite quickly.
Oh, it's like a shift in focus as well, isn't it? So I don't necessarily think, from what we talked about already, that the approach is updating, but it's like this. The Explosive Child is very much from a kind of parent point of view.
Yeah.
Whereas Lost and Found sounds like it's more from a like educator and.
I think it's first Explosive Child was parent, Lost in School was purely in school,
Mm-hmm.
and then this one is like a mix of both.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's from what I've heard, it sounds like it's the most relevant to us in our setting, because we sit in that middle ground thing of being, not a school but not parents.
Yes.
But we are role models and caregivers.
Yes. And he's got a cool website called livesinthebalance.org, and it's a not-for-profit that he runs. And their little blurb says, if we handle kids with power and control, that's what we get back. But what happens if we collaborate with them as partners instead? Lives in the Balance is devoted to moving things in that very direction. Our model is life-changing. Our programmes are life-saving. Our research is compelling. So it's sort of like, in a way, you might say it's quite a basic approach, and it ties very much in with... Alfie Kohn and non-violent communication approaches. It sort of all connects up, I feel, with all of those different American practitioners, don't you think?
It does, yeah. I was impressed at the end of this book. He said a thing that I had been thinking the whole way through, where he went, this is very similar to Non-Violent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. But, I think we'll talk about it further later on, but he said, like, and it's different in this way and this way and this way. And I was like, yeah, you've kind of hit on something there, and I'm glad that there's something that strikes me a bit weird when people claim to have invented the wheel with stuff like this, when they're a bit like, I've come up with this it's all about the cloud system. And
I know, and then there's like a little TM after the name of the approach.
Yes.
The approach. TM.
Shh, if you know
who
we're
approach.
talking about.
TM.
There's something approach.
And I've done this, and it's my idea, and now you have to pay me loads of royalties, which he doesn't do, and but if you read things like what was I gonna read? Like, he's basically saying on his website as well that behaviourally challenging children are often the recipients of the most inhumane, controlling, like thoughtless.
I think
kind
one
of
of the things
by adults.
One of the things that struck me is like, it is one of those books that makes you think about, and I think there has been a move in lots of school educators that I've talked to, but I would have said, when I was teaching, and possibly before, the idea, if you thought about your behaviour policy, in quotes, that is a document that is only thinking about difficult behaviour or like challenging behaviour or naughty behaviour, you know, that's not a thing. Whereas I think, and I think this is a good move, more people now are considering behaviour to be everything. That is your top performing students, that is the mucky middle, some people call them, and that is all behaviour, I think. And I think this book kind of speaks a little bit to that, in that it is thinking about children who need help and support, but not in a way of like, how do you curb it? How do you... And there was... Go on.
Well, I was just going to say that what I like about this book is that he is very honest, but is very compassionate. So he talks about how it kind of gets quite quickly down to whether or not he's talking about children and young people with diagnoses of stuff going on.
Right.
And he says, well, yes, this is including those children, but also including not those children. And actually, it doesn't really matter what the diagnosis is, because your approach is what matters. And there are ways to adapt the approach depending on the needs of the child. But it's almost like, well, say you get your diagnosis of autism, whatever, and rather than just going, right, well, it's the autism, so it's the autism, and that's what it is now, that's what it is, that you actually go, well, I have a big role to play in how I help this child and how I communicate with them, and it almost doesn't matter what the diagnosis is, it's about finding out what the child's problem is and working with them collaboratively to solve it, and it's very it's sort of about readdressing the power dynamic.
Yeah, it's quite empowering, isn't it?
It really is, and it's so the kind of crux of it is, I don't know whether if I talk about like the approach in this book, and then you tell me if it's the same in the Lost and Found one. So he describes, first of all, taking the child in question, for whom this child is not, things aren't going great. So there might be regular meltdowns or violence, aggression,
dysregulation,
and he describes there's case studies in there as well. There's case studies and there's also little narratives about two different families. One who's got a single mother with a teenage son for whom things are going very badly at the moment, and another family who are finding it difficult with older daughter and a younger son, and so every so often he flips back to this narrative so that you can kind of relate it to a narrative version of it, which is quite nice. But he first of all advises doing an ALSUP, which is an audit of lagging skills and unsolved problems. So he describes that feeling you might get as a parent or an adult working with a young person, where everything is overwhelming and you're like, I just can't move forward. Every time I try and do something, they kick off. Every time we do this happens. Blah, blah, blah. And it's completely out of nowhere. I can't identify the triggers. It's completely irrational. Blah blah blah. And it's like, okay, just put all that to one side for a second and sit down. And if you have a co-parent or a colleague or whatever, then do it together. And you're writing down when these things happen, and you describe it as a difficulty. So you reframe your language, which really helps you to reframe your approach to it. So it wouldn't just be like, always kicks off when we arrive at football practice. You'll be like, okay, no, that's I'm sort of describing that with my own emotions rather than looking at it objectively. So in fact, you try and get to the crux of what the difficulty is. So difficulty getting out of the car at football practice, or difficulty putting football boots on when we get to football, really hit on it, and go through that for everything, and you might end up with quite a long list of difficulties. And he's got some lagging skills. He's got a list of lagging skills to look at, and it might be like difficulty with transitions would be a very common lagging skill, or difficulty communicating at this time or whatever. So you get this list, and then you pick your top 3 that are the most difficult for you at the moment as a family, and then you decide to ignore everything else apart from those top 3 for now, and you focus on the top 3, and then he starts talking about plan A, plan B and plan C. And plan A is that very traditional adult in control, authoritarian, listen to me child, you're doing this and it's wrong and I'm going to punish you, or I'm going to tell you what's what. sanctions, rewards, punishments, any sticker charts, all of that stuff is plan A.
Yeah.
And so he's very clear that like this approach is for children and adults for whom plan A has not worked. And he keeps bringing in these like questions, like made up questions from hypothetical parents going, but what if, I need my child to understand boundaries, or I need my child to listen to me. It's like, it isn't about not having boundaries, it isn't about not having discipline, it isn't about not having respect. Actually, you've got way more control when you take this plan B approach that he describes, which is that you don't go in all guns blazing and be like, I'm the adult. You go in with this question: I've noticed you have difficulty getting out of the car at football practice, what's up?
Yeah.
And then it's almost like a kind of counselling or like talking therapy
it's like
approach,
a counselling
isn't it?
framework, isn't it?
Yeah, and then he describes how to get more information out of the child through drilling, and gives lots of example conversations so you can see where it's coming from, and then you try and agree a mutually beneficial, mutually whatever the word is, plan of action. And it might not work first time, and you might need to try something else. But it's really good. And then he kind of also talks about, you might read it and go, well, that's all very well, but actually I've got a child in mind who isn't able to verbally communicate in that way. And so he actually does go into detail about children who might be non-verbal or have lagging communication skills, and other approaches using pictures and diagrams and stuff. And it is just really good. It's like so compassionate, and this is the third time I've read it, and I think each time I've read it, a new penny has dropped, and I've gone, like as I meet more children and read other stuff that connects into it, I think.
Find out about CPD courses at childrenoftheforest.com. Check out the podcast links for more details.
Is that similar to
so there were bits of it. I think my first I'll try and remember that in the right order. So as I was going through the first bit, I felt, listening to the book, that it was a little bit preaching to the converted, in that it's for me, because it was lots of stuff which I was interested that it was in his third book, because he's obviously written it thinking people could read this book standalone as well. So a lot of the beginning of this one was like, he kept using the phrase, children do well when they can, right? Which is this massive thing which I've already internalized, but I get that if you're reading this for the first time and you're picking this book up as a last resort, I need help, somebody hands you the book at a parents' meeting or whatever, they go, try this and do whatever. And so the first bit to me felt really like laboured, and I did put the book on quite fast because I was like, I'm already on board with this. He talks about it being skills. He does say that in this one, he talks about what he did in The Explosive Child and says about the categories of like difficulty with transition, and he said he's scrapped that since.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
He now says that everything is, so far he's found that things are either in multiple categories, or they're not actually in any of those categories. And he said he found that people were using that Allsop report as a like checklist, or either to decide importance, or to go, they've got 5 things wrong with 5 difficulties with transition, so we must work on transition, rather than going, actually, do you know what, secure relationships might be a really important thing to get first, but that's only one incident every week. And so he said he found it easier just to completely wipe that. And so it's now very, very minute, minutiae of like, it is going from maths to PE when they are next to Josephine.
Yes.
Right? Or something that like, you get into, it's that thing.
Yeah, and the approach is quite similar, because then that feeling of like being overwhelmed, going, it's just all the time, it's unmanageable, and then when you write it down you go, oh, hang on a minute, it is actually quite predictable a lot of the time. It is this, and it might take you a while of getting there, but that's interesting.
And then I'm trying to think what the next bit was. It was just kind of, the thing that I thought was really interesting about this book was it's a little bit like we've said a lot, the good thing about OK Not to Share is that it gives you that kind of script, and it gives you lots of questions, it gives you lots of examples. And this one has the same thing, down to like, here is a script. And he You and I have talked about when we did our first aid training, the people that we do our first aid training with are really good at going, okay, A, everyone practice A. Now we're going to talk about B. So go and practice A, B. Now we're going to do C. Everyone go practice A, B, C. So when you're doing first aid, you end up starting every role play by the end of the day with like gloves, hazards, doing this, you know, because you've built it up. And he does that in this book of going like, here's step 1 of the conversation. And I'm going to play that out for you with this child, and I'm going to play it out for you in this child. And then he explains the next bit, and he goes, let's hear it all together.
Yes, he does.
Let's hear A and B.
Yeah.
And then you do that. And I think one of the really interesting bits for me was in that script how much he emphasises, like, one, not going in with a preconceived idea of what, because he's like, if you go in with an idea, even if you think your idea is compassionate and built on needs, that's still a plan A.
Yeah.
Because you've gone in with it and you know where the discussion's going and he's saying you genuinely need to go in with maybe some ideas, but and this is where I think it goes into that forest school thing of like, we go in with a plan, but we're very comfortable with the plan not going where we think we're all equal participants. And in the behaviour, he's saying, you won't get his big thing in the one that I was reading was kind of like hidden information and like emphasizing like you can guess at what you think the need is and what you think the for lack of a better word like triggers are, but unless you involve that person, you know, he has lots of stuff where he's like, so-and-so doesn't like being in the front, she pushes when she's in the line because she's got a real thing about being in the front of the line, and then you talk through and she's like, well, when I'm in the front of the line, the person behind me is this person and they always step on my shoes. It's like, oh, I would never have got that if I didn't have it. And if you go in with your preconceived like, well, I think if you stood with me at the back, then you would be, you know, which I think is the bit that's missing from a lot of like behaviour policies. Is it becomes very top down because
it's just very preventative, isn't it, and very kind of like paternalistic, when actually you can, through this approach, you're doing two things at once. You're kind of trying to solve the problem in the end, hopefully, but you're also teaching the skills needed so that the young person can do it for themselves and learns about themselves for when that adult isn't there. So through that process of communication back and forth, trying to get to the root of the problem, you are teaching that skill. You know, you're kind of building the foundations for that young person to be able to do that for themselves. Yeah,
there was one bit I thought was interesting. I don't know if it's in your book, so because it might be more of a teacher-educator bit. But I think this is where it differs slightly from non-violent communication, which was, so the way they describe the conversation going is, you know, describe incident, you know, you're having difficulty getting out of the car at a time. What's up with that? And he says, leave it with what's up with that. Give them space to talk. Talks about different ways to give them space to talk. And then he says, the next step is you voicing your concerns, or the teacher voicing their concerns. But he says that the concerns should be related for that person. So if it's in a classroom setting, the concern can't be, I have to teach a lesson. The concern has to be, I'm concerned that you'll miss out on the information if you're doing X. Which is where I think it differs, because it's not then, you're not saying you should have empathy for me, the teacher. You're just saying all of this is revolving around you and your needs. And my concern is only for your needs, or the only concerns I'm going to tell you about right now for your needs. Which I thought was interesting.
What about the next step, though, when he's describing trying to come up with ways to solve the problem? Because in this book he will say the child goes, well, he gives an example of two brothers that are playing with cars in the playroom and they keep fighting, and one of the other brothers is like, well, he keeps touching my stuff, and the parent's like, but we agreed that the stuff in the playroom didn't belong to you or the other kid, it's like joint stuff. He keeps touching stuff that I'm still playing with. Okay, well, what are you still playing with? Everything. I'm still playing with everything. And so the parent does say, well, you know, what's the solution? He's like, well, I get to play with all the toys and my brother doesn't. And so obviously that would suit that solution would suit that child, but it wouldn't suit the other child or the parent. So the parent does go, oh, I am concerned that isn't going to help your brother out. So what does it say about that? If the child comes up with an idea that is actually not mutually agreeable
I think there's
to the
two.
adult.
I think there's two bits to that. One is that the examples in the book in Lost and Found are very much based on there are two parties. One is an adult, one is a child, and it doesn't really, as far as I remember, touch on peer-to-peer mediating.
Okay.
It's more about like it's kind of set up in that way of like, get them in 10 minutes early to the head teacher's office and have this discussion there and in that thing. They do talk about them being sustainable and achievable. So saying like, oh, I'll just sit next to Mike but I won't talk, and then you go, well, I'm not sure that's a realistic thing to do. I wonder if there's anything else we could do. That's an interesting one though, about using it as mediation, because I guess you could say in that scenario, if you were trying to go, my concern is for you, you go, oh, my concern would be that if you are playing with all of the things, that will make brother upset, and then they might hit you, hurt, say something mean, break your toys, and I wouldn't want that to happen to you and your toys. So how do we, because then that is relating, but do you know what I mean about it becomes quite a selfish exercise, quite a self-centered exercise. But whether that's good because you're like, this is a process that is solely around your needs.
Well, yeah, if you are in a school setting, so this book, touches on things like fairness, like making sure that things are fair, and it very clearly says that doesn't necessarily mean the same or equal. So it has a really lovely chapter on sibling relationships and what it's like to live in a family with a child who faces a lot of behavioural challenges and a child or other children who don't, and so how you parent in that way. And you've got one child who's like, hang on, they're like the naughty one in inverted commas, and they get all the attention, and how come they get more of the time?
Well, that's a common complaint, isn't it? Not just from
all
children,
of that thing,
parents as well, and
exactly. And if you're in a school setting, it's really hard to then talk about like fairness, because you've got 30 of those little imbalances and different approaches, haven't you? So to turn around to a kid who's facing a lot of challenges and go, well, if I let you do that, it's not really fair to the class, it's not going to help them. Like they're already, things are already stacked against them, aren't they? So I can kind of see why that approach in a school setting might be more just about the child. Like, we're just going to talk about you because it's too massive. It's like massive for the teacher to consider all the needs of the class, let alone that kid. Because if you say, well, that's not fair on Bill at the back of the class because he, is visually impaired, and it's not fair on Jenny who sits next to you because she has sensory issues. And do you know what I mean? It's just like, whoa.
That's too much empathy for somebody who, if we're thinking that empathy and that theory of mind stuff comes in at about 6, 7 years old, to go straight from you can think of nobody's experience but your own to now consider your class of 30 and your school of 100 whatever. Yeah. That's one of the things that I remember from teaching, and I still think about schools is like, it's too much. That schools are really big on like building community and building that feeling of like, we're together, and that's often the reason given for like uniform or for school assemblies. But if you think about it as a skill, it's way too massive to go that, you think a proportion of people coming into year 1, let's say, have difficulty controlling their own impulses, and then you go, I'm going to try and instill in you a sense of empathy and theory of mind of this, small Devon village school, 100 children, massive 3-form entry.
But it's not real, is it? It's pretend. You've got people to conform to a certain like behavioural expectation, but it isn't actually founded on real, because it can't be. You can't have empathy for that many people. You can't have an understanding of that. People
are not. No. I don't feel like that.
And also that thing about so with a parent-child relationship where you're living with a child, that discussion about, well, yeah, I see that solution might work for you, but that doesn't work for me because that's going to make me feel upset, or it's going to hurt me, or like you can't have that same conversation with a child if you're their teacher, because the power dynamic is already so different. So you couldn't really turn around to a kid in your class who is like confiding in you, telling you what the problem is and has an idea, and then you go, that's not really fair on me though, is it? Like that just somehow is really icky. Like as a parent,
I guess you might rephrase, because I'm trying to think of what examples you would say that's not fair, and it would be like if the solution they presented resulted in 30 more hours of work a week for you or something. But then I suppose you would frame that as like, I'm not sure that's sustainable for me to do whatever. So it's not about being fair. It's just about going like, I might be able to do that for you this week, but I know I can't keep that up.
Exactly. And also to relate it back to them as well, to go, well, okay, but that would result in me doing 5 more hours of work a day, which would mean that when I teach you tomorrow, when I see you tomorrow, I'm going to be absolutely knackered. So I'm not going to be the best teacher I can be for you tomorrow. Or, you know, if... Yeah, relating it back to them, that result of, well, when you get upset, you're going to scream in my face for 10 minutes until you feel better, that's going to run me into the ground, and so I'm not going to be able to keep that up, like you say, being sustainable, and then the impact will be back on them, rather than, that'll really hurt my feelings, and poor me. It's like, you're being paid to do that job. You can't really say poor me to that kid. Yeah. There's something weird about that.
Well, I'm not sure if it's in that book, but one of the techniques that they say in the Lost and Found one is lots of, like, in that non-violent way, of like just repeating back almost word for word what's said.
Listening.
Reflective listening is massive.
Yeah.
Applications for Forest School training are now open at childrenoftheforest.com. Check out the podcast links for more details.
But because nominally we're supposed to be talking about Forest School, if I was thinking, and I was thinking, like, this is amazing, you know, I think this could be really useful for not just like the ones that are a bit tricky sometimes, or the ones that I know have obvious skill difficulties, but going, this would be a great thing to instill. The Lost and Found one, because it's based around school settings or educational settings, and it talks quite a lot about like, so take, you know, have someone else watch your class while they're doing quiet reading and go and spend 15 minutes having this conversation with a child, or you know, get another teacher to do X for you. And he even talks about having a dictaphone and recording the conversations you have with the child, partly so that you can, for your own reflective thing, but he then says, if you want to instill this as a practice around the school, what you then do at a staff meeting is you play back the recording. Obviously you get everyone's permission.
Yeah.
You play back the recording. You're not reviewing the content. You're reviewing how did the educator do. So everybody sits around and go, did you realise you cut them off there? You didn't quite reflect that. And so everybody is then building this skill set.
That's
like,
cool.
which is amazing. So when I was applying that to what could you and I do, now we've got a massive advantage over a lot of people. There's 2 of us. So we do have some more space, I think, to go, are you happy to run this? I'm going to go. But what I thought was interesting was stumbling block 1 was that we value autonomy and self-direction so highly that I immediately hit that thing of like, well, I'll say to that person, do you want to come have a chat with me for a minute? And they'll go, jog on, mate. I'm actually going to go play on this. You know, how do you... it starts with an air of authoritarianism to go, I want to have this conversation with you and I will make it happen.
Yeah, well, it also, this book talks about emergency plan B.
Yes.
So plan B is scheduling a time with the child to sit down and talk about what's going on, and give them some warning of it. Don't just bring it on them, go, tomorrow or Saturday, is it okay if we sit down and chat? And they'll look at you like, what the heck? But
breaking up with me?
Hopefully you'll get
we
there.
need to talk.
But emergency plan B is how you, like, something has happened and you're in the heat of the moment, and obviously he keeps
dynamic
saying,
risk assessment.
And he's like, he stresses loads of time, you know, this is only in emergencies. Ideally you want to be doing this proactively so that these like flare-ups don't happen so often. But sometimes you are going to have to do it in the moment, and that's kind of more what happens at forest school, isn't it? Because it's like something has happened and you have to go and help, and it's the words you use and the approach you choose in that moment, and that is often when you do end up in the one-to-one situation with a person who's upset for whatever reason or out of control, dysregulated, and that's kind of your sort of chance, isn't it?
But it's an interesting. So I was thinking about the analogy of. John Cree has said to me before about strike when the iron's cold. That is the thing. So we have both semi-regularly ended up in those situations where you go, I'm just going to remove this person, I'm going to go with them, we're going to go over there, do whatever. The rate at which different children cool to cold is very different. And for some children you might go, this is a explosive dysregulating situation, either we're going to move everybody else away or I'm going to move you away, and within a couple of minutes of just going, either going ah or going kicking, I'm going to kick this tree, and then you realise within 2-3 minutes they've actually gone, the shoulders have dropped, they've gone, and you kind of go, okay, now you're cold, now we can talk about this thing. And
see, I wouldn't take it ever to mean that. I would take it to mean more in this respect, like completely proactively, like when it's miles away.
Oh no,
from
that's
the
what.
situation.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? Not afterwards, but like.
But if we're saying that that's often the situation where we end up in a one-to-one conversation, and sometimes you realise you can have that one-to-one, you can have a bit of it in that moment of like, oh, I've ended up one-to-one with you, and you're cold, so like emotionally, so. Let's have a chat now about, oh, that was a bit tricky, wasn't it? Let's have that. And some children, you go, well, I've removed you and you have cooled down a bit, but you are not in a place to talk to me. You're ready to go back and be safe and join back in, and maybe that's what you need to repair some peer relationships right now. Yeah. But you're in no way cold for me to bring up.
See, we were just talking about this before we started recording, weren't we? Actually, about like the moments you have sort of one-to-one with children, and you suddenly go, oh, I hardly ever end up having any one-to-one moments with that child. And definitely what you described about going, oh, it's 10:30 and it's Tuesday, it's time for my appointment with Billy Bob. That's just like bleh. And not forest school, is it? But you do end up doing the washing up alongside somebody, or like you quite often go, you just say to me, I'm going to offer to so-and-so that they come with me and use the power tools over here to make this thing, and I'm just going to take them because I feel like they'd really benefit from that. And that maybe those moments are when...
Like organic meetings.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. And it is kind of like, and you sort of test the waters a little bit, and you're like, the problem with that, I guess, is that isn't giving them full warning of the scheduled appointment, which is what Ross Greene says, because so then they're doing something really fun with you, and then you start bringing up like deep and meaningful stuff, and they're just like, holy shit. So that's obviously not ideal either, is it? But it may happen, and sometimes I've had it where they will say something before you even instigate it, like they want to talk, and especially if you're kind of practicing reflection as a group often, then it's not too weird for them to get into that kind of vibe with you.
Well, and also, I was just wondering whether so it's not mentioned in Lost and Found, and I think this would be and I don't think this would work in a school, but I think it's a really good feather in the forest school hat, I suppose, is that I would say we can have better conversations doing handwork. So they would describe a lot of these conversations as like, go into your meeting room or go into the like social and emotional classroom, whatever, space, and you sit down and you kind of with a pen and paper and you do this thing. I think we probably have those conversations when we're whittling, or when we're doing stuff with clay,
planting trees,
or when we're not making eye contact.
Definitely.
And so what we lose in forewarning, we gain in it's like not being as daunting, and I think lots more conversation comes out. It's a bit like they say,
and confrontational. If
you're gonna bring up something difficult, do it in the car, because you're both looking forwards at the road. You're not staring across the table at each other.
Definitely.
And so it's that thing, isn't it? Of like, I think a lot of forest school conversations come out when your hands are busy, because, and there's also, it's that thing. It's a bit like having background music where you can say like, oh yeah, that was when you guys were on the hammocks earlier, that was a bit tricky, wasn't it? And then go like, yeah, or do you want to talk about it for a minute? Nah. And you can just let it go if you're also, because you can just go, oh, I'm just going to whittle for a minute and let them, and then they might come back with, I just think the thing is,
yeah.
Whereas if you're staring at each other across the table, or there's just this ticking sound of a clock in the background or something, then that's really like, who's talking?
Yeah.
Why aren't you talking?
Yeah.
How long has it been?
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing that I would go, maybe I just, when I'm having those handwork chats, I'll maybe reframe it in my head of like, oh, this is my social and emotional room. This whittling tool area is my space.
It's weird, I just had like a teaching flashback where, so in schools I've worked at, someone's doing something that's not right according to the school. Not conducive to learning, not a part of the school rules, whatever, and you name and shame them by writing their name on the board and go, please stop swinging in your chair, or stop shouting out, or whatever, or stop pretending to masturbate under the table, stop trying to show that video of the teacher that looks like a porn star to your friend at the back of class. Stop doing, these are all real things.
Hang on, did you say that the right way around? The video of the teacher?
Of the porn star that looks like a teacher.
Okay.
Yes.
Because the other way around is very different.
And they don't stop, so you put a little tick or a little mark by their name. First warning, still carry on. Second warning, right, out you go, stand outside in the corridor. So the stand outside in the corridor.
I know loads of teachers that do minutes.
Oh,
you get a name and then you get...
Minutes can fuck right off, man. When has that ever ended up? Right, nobody's listening, so that's 1 minute into break. You've got the lesson before break.
Yeah.
Yes, you're nice.
And you just...
break time, what the fuck? Like, so then you get no coffee, you get no fucking break time. You needed a piss and couldn't go. Anyhow, well, do you know what? We've got to stop school bashing. I'm going to say again, we're very appreciative of school in terms of the people who are working there and like doing everything they can for children and young people. We've been there.
Are we? No, I'm joking.
We've been there, and comrades. I still feel.
I've always said this. It is the system and the setup and the things about school that I don't like. It's never the person in there doing it, because a lot of it becomes self-preservation.
We're in a privileged position that we have autonomy over how we work with young people.
They've all turned it off now. We bashed it so much.
This wasn't going to be school bashing. This is going to be an insightful thing about like when you send the kid into the corridor. That is the only time you get to have that one-to-one discussion with them about what's up. And I remember at the time thinking, this is kind of interesting, because going to stand in the corridor is supposed to be a punishment. It's supposed to be a sanction. It's supposed to, but like how, like, I'm not saying it's not effective, because often it is effective, because they get to cool down, they get to be away from everybody else, the audience is gone, they get to just chill out for a bit and have a bit of breathing space, and then they get sometimes quite quality one-to-one, quality comparatively to the amount of attention they're going to get in a class of 30. Obviously if you go out into the corridor and then blow it all up in their face again, that's not great. But if you go, so what was going on there? What was happening? That is kind of the... this approach, but not great.
Yeah.
But that is the kind of only time you really get, which is kind of interesting. Why were you laughing just then?
Sorry, I was laughing because I had a very... So there's a series of like social faux pas in a story from my school. So I was at grammar school, all boys school, had a female teacher, and she... we must have been in, let's say, year 9. So what are you in year 9? Like 14? Something 13, like that? 13, and she was going around, she was looking at everybody's book, and she... I don't think she should have said this. She was marking my work, and then she looked at me and she went, "Oh, Lewis, you might need a shave soon." Right, because you had those like two little lines of hair that grow from the corner of And my friend who was sat next to me, the quickest I've ever heard anyone went, "Nah, you need a shave, mate." Right, and she blew up, right, and so her sanction was. During, what do you call it, like tutor time, like registers each time. She went, "I'm not having you in my classroom. Go next door to Mr. So-and-so's room. That is where you're going for registration birthday." That's a sixth form classroom. Right? So my mate, 13, had to walk in and knock on the door and go, "Miss says I have to come in here." And they went, why? And he went, I told her she needed a shave. And the room next door erupted of like, way! What a legend! This kid's the king!
Oh
and he had the best week in the other class because he was just like, that kid's a legend.
Yeah.
He told the teacher to shave. and then he came.
Poor woman.
It was
Poor woman.
But I stand by that she shouldn't have made the comment to me.
No, of course she shouldn't.
And it was just funny. And I don't even think he really thought about it. He just heard the opening and went, I'm just going to say this thing back.
Yeah.
But it was just, sorry, as you were saying, like, sending a kid outside. So, what were we talking about? What are we talking about? Books.
The book.
The books. And so, I think it is a thing that people who are running forest schools should at least have a look at, because I think it is, I think it's an actionable approach in the way that lots of people, and I saw this really recently in a Facebook group, somebody said, my group have started getting quite proficient with fires and something else. Does anybody do any like celebrations or certificates for skills? Cue the bashing of like, fuck you, praise and punishments, and interesting, some people that have been on our podcast are then going like, I work in, it's Andy, can't remember Andy's last name, but he was going to work from an SEN, perspective, and it's very elitist because those children might never achieve it, and so I think forest schools place, blah, 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 and I shared Alfie Cohn's book, but Alfie Cohn's one isn't really actionable. And I think one of the things is like, when that discussion comes up, people are very quick to go, it shouldn't be a place, you shouldn't do the thing. And I think this could be the actionable approach, because quite often when people talk about rewards and celebrations and things, they're talking about behaviour management and talking about how do I encourage children that aren't motivated, or how do I do carrots, right? Because that is a better step than sticks, right? It's a step forwards, but maybe it's not the whole step. Whereas I think recommending this book to people would be a way of going, this has got some actionable processes in it, and if you are in a school setting, you can take it to school and go, this is people were saying, how do my management want plans, my management want written up stuff, and you can go, this is the plan I'm going to follow for improving behaviour through forest school.
And exactly, because forest school is often used as intervention, isn't it, especially if you're working in a school, so you may end up with a group, like a nurture group or a group of children that have been like removed from a classroom specifically for a project or a reason. If you are already in that position where you're working with children who are facing challenges, then this is going to be very helpful to you, isn't it? Yeah,
I think what I said at the start, like, it was a bit preaching to the converted, but sometimes that's good to have a thing that you might already have been doing, because it's not going to feel like an intrusion when you give it to a head teacher or to a senior leadership team or a line manager or something and go, this is what I'm going to do. Because you're basically going, this is what I was going to do anyway, it just wasn't written in a book.
Yeah.
Here it is, that meets your needs. It's all needs.
Of course.
This meets my line manager's needs.
Yeah, and also it's going to help the kid across the board in school as well, isn't it? Because if you're able to have documented what's the difficulties that they're facing, lagging skills.
This is the thing. People are always like, forest school, I don't have a skills progression. If you were like, skills in transition, skills in this, that's much, and going, this is specifically what they needed. Is it time intensive? Absolutely. Is it personalised and holistic and actually going to do people the world of good? Yeah, absolutely. But it's not, I don't think it's going to be easy.
No. And he does say that, he keeps saying that in the book. He's like, these are the problems you may encounter when you're trying to have this like conversation with the child and they go, don't give a shit, don't care.
Yeah.
Don't care. And you're like, oh, okay, where do I take that? So it isn't like this will just fix everything.
Magic bullet.
He does say it is more difficult than plan A, but plan A wasn't working. So just put that, you might keep going, but it's really hard. But they didn't engage. But they didn't. Yep, you're absolutely right. No, they didn't. They didn't the first time. They might have done, they might do it the 55th time, but you've already tried plan A. You've tried the shouting. You've tried the tensions. You've tried taking away their PlayStation, and that didn't work.
Do you know
if anything,
what?
It made it worse.
That occurs to me that, so similarly, you and I were having a conversation before we started recording about a group of learners who had a dysregulated moment, peer to peer, and then later on, as they were sat around having lunch or having whatever, they were just chewing it over again, and you were saying you stepped in and just kind of reminded them quite, openly, and going, yeah, you're right, and that's gone now, isn't it? That didn't, oh yeah, you're right, that person didn't do that. And that's almost what it's like, reminding people that, like, this is hard, but plan A wasn't working. Because lots of staff rooms, I think you'd have similar conversations of people just chewing the cud over, of going like, yeah, and I tried to put his name on the board and he still wouldn't listen. And there's rarely a voice in those conversations going, should we not do it then?
Yeah.
It's just because it's very cathartic to sit round with lots of other educators and go, God, yeah, person X does Y and I have to keep them in for what, and everyone goes, yeah, when they were in my class I did the thing.
And the next thing that happens in those conversations is that then very well meaning, myself included, absolutely go, well, what's the reason then? And then stick a label on it. So, oh, do you know what I think it is? I heard that their home life is really tricky right now, or I heard that someone in their family just died, or I think they probably are autistic, or blah, blah, blah. Solve the problem, not solve the problem at all. Just stuff a label on it. It's not my fault. It's no longer really my responsibility because it's that reason I can't do anything about it. Whereas this book is like, yes, and. So therefore, the next thing is, you can't change that for that child. That is their situation, or that is the way their brain is wired. That doesn't mean you just go, oh, well, shrug your shoulders, they're always going to be difficult and I can't wait till they're not in my class anymore. That means that you have to significantly look at yourself and adapt your approach to that child, because your mainstream standard approach is never going to work. It's not like it just needs time and then it'll work. They'll grow out of it. It won't ever work. So you have to be the flexible one. And what I like about the book as well is that it keeps reminding you, he keeps using this phrase, it takes two to tango. It takes two to tango, either with yourself as the adult and the kid, or with another child. So you might have a child who's like, shiny halo on and keeps getting, challenged by this other child, but actually they've always got a part to play in it, and they're not always going to be the shiny halo child.
There's an incredible bit where so talking in the Lost and Found one, this might be going backwards in terms of chronology of the book, but he's talking about when you do the I've forgotten the name, ALSUP report, and saying that, like, you write down, you don't write the reason down. You don't write like, the problem is they hit people, right? That's not the problem. The problem is standing in line, or the difficulty is, standing in line. Or you don't write down like, because he's like, if it's got a because in it, bin it.
Yeah.
You just write down what is the difficulty. So not the resulting behaviour, not your guess at a reason, blah, blah, blah. And I just loved it. There's an example in there where he says, like, the thing is, lots of people will say, his or her challenge is that they just want their own way, right? And then he goes, and what you're saying is, I can't get my way because they want their way. And I was like, it's literally you standing at the front of the class and going, I want it way A, and then a kid at the back going, well, I would like it to be B, and you going, what a knobhead, he wants it his way. That is equally you going like, I want it my way and I'm not relenting on it.
Well, there's this sentence in this book that really made me read it quite a few times. And so after talking about all those, like, difficulty and lagging skills, he then says, like, near the end of the book, a high percentage of the solutions to problems encountered by human beings fall into one of three general categories. 1, ask for help. 2, meet halfway or give a little. And 3, do it a different way. These categories can simplify things for kids whose communication skills are compromised. But I thought that was a really interesting... I was like, oh, do I agree with that? That's really interesting. But it kind of ties into what you were just saying in terms of it is all about, like, well, I want my way. Well, I want my way. Well, the way we're going to solve the problem is either ask for help, somebody bends a bit, or just chuck it in the bin and do it a different way. Yeah. And that is actually quite like, oh...
And quite often the expectation is that the learner will be the one that, if you go for that middle, like, someone has to compromise a little bit, the expectation is that, like, I will motivate, reward, cajole in some way to make them be the one that gives. If they need physical movement, but I bet if I put them on the proud cloud, I can cajole them into
just sitting still a bit longer.
Just sitting still a bit longer. But that's not you going, I could make my lesson a bit shorter, and they could stay a bit longer. That's you just going, well, if I do X, I'll control them a little bit into Y.
Yeah, completely. And this book kind of doesn't outright say, check yourself out, but kind of does. It's a little bit like, if you're having these problems, especially as a parent, you might realise that actually these are challenges for you as well, and you've grown a way to kind of deal with them, or maybe not. But you don't necessarily look at yourself and go, oh, I also have difficulty doing blah 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 at blah 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 time, and it's your child that's, it keeps saying you will probably learn stuff yourself through going through this process. It's sitting down with another human being and going, okay, let's talk this out, what is really going on. Has amazing benefits for you as well, even though it's really hard.
I can imagine from a parent scenario that's even more so like as an educator, you are like meeting a child for the first time. Let's say you might have known them a month, a year, however long, but you're not the primary influence on their personality, whatever. But yeah, as a parent, that almost all of the in quotes environmental stuff is going to come back in some way or another to, like, that's you, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's you. They have to.
It takes two to tango.
It takes two to tango, and I think it's worth putting the caveat in though that, like, we touched on, like, this is also helpful for children who have different diagnoses or different neurodiversity, all those things. So we're not going like, it's your fault if your kid's programmed like X, or if it's your fault.
No,
but it is that thing of going like, is there some reflection in your home life where in your house nobody yields, nobody ever backs down, and then you go, why won't they back down in school? And you go, well, you've created an environment, or you've not created. Digging myself into a hole. It's very dark and deep down here. Please talk, please, because I've offended everybody.
No, you haven't offended everybody, and I think that is, he does talk about that in terms of, like, you thinking it's your fault. And I was just reminded, I've just found this guy called Harry Thompson, PDA extraordinaire, on Facebook.
Amazing.
He is amazing, and he has a range. He has a range of T-shirts and mugs, which say things like CAMS, Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services. So his acronym of CAMS is Cunty Adults Who Hate the Spectrum.
Whoa.
And things like that. One of his T-shirts says, I hate everyone, and things like that. But one of them is like, if you're a parent of a child who's autistic and somebody tells you to go on a parenting course, and I can't remember the last half of the mug, but it's basically, like, go fuck yourself. But that is obviously a real thing, for parents who have kids who face challenges. You're just in such a hard position because you've got people from all sides. You've got your bloody parents and, the kids' grandparents going, well, in my day, I would have just given you just need to beat them more. And that's a gross stereotype of grandparents.
You're right.
But do you know what I mean? It's got all of those, you've got it from all sides.
Yeah.
And so you are in this guilt hole, and then you're like, oh, maybe it's me. What genes have I passed on?
Well, that's one of the things that I think is really difficult, isn't it? It's like, particularly, we're talking about a UK base here, which statistically, from looking at the algorithms, over half of you are in the UK, listener. But there is a sort of unspoken thing of your children are a reflection of you, which is where so much, like, social anxiety and so much, like, I don't want to say questionable things, but, like, in the moment reactions of, like, I'm so worried about, and we see it at our groups, I'm so worried about being seen, like, that my child not saying thank you is a reflection on me, that I must go over the top to go grab the child, come on, we're going to go and say thank you, I'm going to make a big song and dance out of the thank you, because it's not actually about the kids saying thank you, it's about the reflection on me as a parent and going, you will think poorly. And so you extend that out to children with SEN needs, then SEN needs, I've said needs twice. Special needs.
Challenges.
Then that is going to be exponentially more, isn't it? Because you can't even look at it and go, this is a reflection on me. This is like such a out of societal expectation on me.
Yeah.
But I do think, to drag the topic back to the book, I think having the book and doing this process as a parent would be, and I already thought about doing it with my son.
Support the podcast today by becoming a Patreon member at childrenoftheforest.com. Check out the podcast links for more details.
Just as a it's like another thing like Leuven or whatever else, but to be able to look back and go, because I can't imagine doing this process and going, I've achieved absolutely nothing. I can't see you going through the process of having a conversation about needs, about having a conversation about what's a workable solution, about trying solutions, trying multiple solutions, going through this whole process and going, do you know what? They made absolutely no progress. I think you are going to get something somewhere. So then you've got this tangible thing of we have made progress.
Yeah.
This is a step, and like you say, a lot of people will come to these books in a state of panic, in a state of everything's just too much and it's too random. And even if you go, I haven't solved these things, but I know a bit more about the triggers.
Completely. Just even if it is just understanding. And so a bit I reread this morning, which is one of the little fictional narrative bits of a mum dealing with a teenage daughter who's presenting really challenging behaviour. And basically their life has become very divided, where the teenage daughter's just in her room with DVDs all the time, and every time she tries to interact with the family. Exactly, what is a DVD? One of the solutions that she has is to record her shows on VHS, so that that if she misses her TV show, okay, that's very old. Anyway, and there's a moment where they've had their first problem-solving meeting, and it's gone surprisingly well, and the mum is shocked and gone, oh my god, she actually talked. And then the kid brings it up the next day, is I've had another idea, and the mum is like, oh my god, this is incredible. And then either that night or the next day, she is going to the fridge, and then she suddenly has a moment. She's like, I'm going to turn around, I'm going to go upstairs, and her husband says, where are you going? She's like, I'm going to go and see if our daughter wants me to tuck her in at night. And the dad goes, well, she hasn't wanted that for years and years and years. Why are you doing it now? She's like, because I've just realised that I've been focusing on all the things she isn't. And now I'm beginning to, and I realise that's wrong. And now I'm focusing on the things that she is. And so I'm going to go and tuck her in. And it's that reconnection because of the understanding. I was like, yes, that's completely it, isn't it? Because if you're just seeing the problems all the time, and you're never actually getting the child's point of view and the difficulty, and that reframing of the perspective and going, it's a difficulty, it's a challenge, how can I punish you for a skill which you don't have yet? So then if you're looking at it from that perspective, and I think even, as you say, preaching to the converted, even if you already do that, there's always a little bit where you can have more understanding of, there's always space for more of that, isn't there? It can never be a bad thing. So if it means that you've had a conversation with a child, or even just a reframing of the way you see them, which means that you can approach them with more love, then you're always going to win, aren't you?
The more understanding you have, I think the better practitioner you will be for those children, just in a way of because you might identify something, you go, look, they're really having trouble when we get the hammocks out, and their hammock is, so we hang our hammocks too high, one on top of the other, and some children are really insistent that their hammock be the top hammock, to the point where they all want to be the top hammock, and you kind of go, well, if it doesn't work, then there's no top hammock. Anyway, but then you might if you approach that need, and then you start to understand, and you have this dialogue about whatever else, then when you plan something else, you have a different bit of information that comes into your holistic planning, that you don't have to get it wrong. You then go, oh, well, when we play this game, that need that they're expressing over there is probably going to come with them into this game. So I'm not going to, it's shortcut. It's not shortcut.
Well, no, but it is, and it says that in the book as well, from the child's perspective too. So if they have worked with you to solve a problem A, so you say you've identified your 3 top problems, a lot of the other problems that follow on from that are going to be variations on that, or the solutions are going to be variations on that. So if they've worked through that solution with you, chances are the solution to a problem down the line is going to have a similar vibe to it, which they're going to remember from doing it with you, which is giving them the skills for life.
And it's then a thing that they can go, I remember thinking it was anyone that I've adults that I've met who are on the autistic spectrum, I'm always really impressed with how so some of them can really articulate, like, my need is this, but it will work well for me if you can accommodate me in this way, and this way. And so then that's building that autonomy and that, like, real world skill of, like, they don't then have to go to, say, when they become a bit older, maybe they go into, like, a interview for uni or something, or a job interview, and they don't have to go, oh, well, I can bottle this up and I'm going to have to cope with it. They can just go,
in this way.
I'll mask in this way. You can just go to the interviewer and go, if it's possible, these things would really help put me at ease, or, like, have, you know, and I think as a society, I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but I think people are moving to more of a case of going, you know, particularly in, like, the working world, if you do the job well, it doesn't matter how we accommodate your needs. There's no longer, like, factory producing children to factory, you know, stuff. It's like, oh, okay, you're a creative person, and to be creative you need more light, or you need to work at these hours. Great, if that's what gets the creative work going. But if you don't know that, then you get trapped in this system of, like, well, I better knuckle under and my needs never get met, and then you know. And
it's like there's two things I want to say in response to that, and then I think maybe we should, like, stop waffling on. Has this been, like, about 2-hour podcast?
Yes, 94 hours long.
Okay, my two things are, another point that Ross Greene makes is that even if, because he says, like, you know, what about if plan A really works for one of my kids, which is the, like, do what I say plan. It's like, well, even if it does, it probably means that that plan B will also work for them if they're just, like, pretty chilled and do whatever. And surely plan B is also better for those children, because you don't want to raise a child that just goes, I just do what I'm told and I do what adults tell me because they have the best way. Like, that is also not healthy. And second of all, in terms of neurodivergence, I feel like hopefully there's a reframing going on in the world where instead of going, it is a disability, if you are autistic you have a disability, no you don't, that you are disabled by the world having this mainstream approach of one size fits all, and, you know, you've got a problem and we need to medicate you, or we need to, like,
you need to conform, you need to
adapt your behaviour to suit my expectations. That needs to get in the bin. It's about, you know, the mainstream approach is disabling to a lot of neurodivergent people, and the more people who become aware of that, the better. The better.
And then we're just got really militant at the end.
Yes.
Just absolute power fist.
Yes.
Well, do you know what I wanted to say before we go? I wanted to say a thank you to everybody that is supporting us through Patreon. It is by no means a you know, we're not kicking our feet up and going, like, cool, let's buy a swimming pool each, but it's lovely to know that people are finding what we do helpful, and even the people that aren't supporting us on Patreon, the people that are telling their friends, or the people that are, like, sharing our stuff on Facebook and linking,
writing, like, a nice comment on the Instagram, because that is so,
and we like seeing what you guys are doing. I really do like seeing the people that are like, oh, I was listening to such and such an episode about mushrooms, and here's the mushrooms my group found today. And it's always like, oh, cool, we've like, you know, it's sort of like a really nice connection thing. And I want to say, as a sneaky plug, if anyone wants to, on our website, on our we have a Teespring page, which has the stuff, like, with our Forest School groups on it, but it's also got some podcast, like, t-shirts and jumpers and stuff. And I've made it as cheap as it possibly can be. They're like, the website sets it up so it's like, oh, the shirt costs £11 to make, and if you charge 15, then you get £4. Right? Everything is set so that we make nothing off those shirts, of those things. But you get a cool little logo. It's got my face on it and your face on it. And what's really nice is, because I sometimes wear mine, and I wear braces on my work trousers, and they go up and they go over your face, so it's just my face on my t-shirt.
Oh man.
So if you also wear braces and you want to wear just my face,
the bib hopefully would hide all of that.
Your bib.
The bib
that you wear when you eat.
No, the dungaree bib. The dungaree bib just obliterates any kind of logo branding that you might have thoughtfully designed.
Yeah.
So maybe I need it on a hat instead.
Yeah.
But it's got but I tell you my main beef with all this is that my hairstyle is out of date.
Well,
do you know what? You changed your hairstyle when it was out of date. I demand you, the creative person who spends all the time and energy doing all these things and coming up with them in the first place.
Yes.
Because I seem to remember there was a logo with you with like a side.
You had a side sweep. Well, I had hair.
When you had hair, you had a side sweep. And now my hair looks very like...
Yeah, side sweep is a very nice way of saying comb over.
Never had a comb over.
My hair was going, oh yeah, it's a side sweep, guys. It's actually a very heavy side sweep. Right from this side, and it's sweet.
Oh my God.
Okay. Well, there you go then. Nobody buy a shirt yet. I will fix Gemma's hair. And what you got to go is you got to go and look on the website now and see, has Gemma's hair been changed?
Yeah.
And if it has changed, then support Gemma's new hairstyle. Which is the same as her old hairstyle, but slightly longer because she's not had it cut. So, if you're interested in more fashion tips,
well, I was enjoying. There was a thread on the Facebook groups this week about like some. I just love the way it was put. It was like, can I just ask you all, like, what the heck do you do about your personal appearance? Because I've recently started working the woods, and I mean, I'm destroyed. Like, you know, and then people just. It was hilarious. It was not hilarious. Like some people going, do you know what? You need to get nail varnish. Like, just wear nail varnish in the woods every day. Yeah, it was amazing. It was really interesting. Different people's approaches. I loved reading it. It's like this brand of nail polish doesn't chip so easily, so you just hide the mud. So it's not about like personal grooming. It's about just like hide the mud and look glam, and everyone will be like, "Whoa, you work in the woods, but you've got these cool fingernails. That's awesome." And some people are just going, "Yeah, I'm just stopped bathing altogether. I don't wash anymore, and I have dreads, and that's how I deal with it." And other people going, "Yeah, well, no, I find this brand of tinted moisturiser like really hides the mud really well. So if you try this."
Look, whatever tinted moisturiser I use is clearly working. No, my solution is shave your head, grow a big beard.
Shave your head, grow a beard. Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah. But lots of people are saying the same problem, which I laughed about because it's exactly mine, which is like, yeah, I deal with this by wearing my hair in a top messy bun, or I always wear a hat so I don't stink of smoke. Lots of people talking about the eau de feu, which is people go, what's burning? Something's on fire? No, it's me. I work outdoors. I work by campfire. But also one that is less often talked about, but was talked about in this thread about you've done all you need to do to deal with your personal appearance, except for your shoes, where you never bring a pair of shoes to change into in your car. So you have to go to Tesco's, and as well as walking around Tesco's looking like you are some kind of vagrant, you leave a trail of mud like a snail trail behind you. Because and you feel really guilty. You're like, shit, I've done it again. These poor staff that happened to like clear up after me. I'm sorry.
Do you know what though? I feel slightly mitigated in that sense, and I'm very appreciative of the fact that we live in the Devon countryside, and so yes, I am wearing welly boots everywhere, but most people assume I work on a farm. There's so much agriculture around here. I got accosted by somebody a couple of years ago in B&Q. She would not leave me alone. The staff
thought you worked there.
No, because she was like, "Oh, have you got a trades card?" And I went, "Oh no, I'm not in the trades. I've got braces on."
The trades.
The trades.
I'm not in the
I'm not a trades. And then I tried to think of any of the like words of bricky, sparky. I tried to be a man, and she was like, "Oh right. Okay, don't worry." And then I went on a different arm, and they followed me around, and she went like, "It's just if you had a trades card, you could do the thing." And I went, "No, I don't, like, I'm basically a teacher. In this context, I'm a teacher." She went, "Oh right, it's just you just look so much like somebody that works. I thought you must do. I thought I must offer him it." Yeah. And she went on and started the conversation with, "I'm not."
Yeah.
But she was so insistent that she wanted me to have this. I almost went, "Okay, fine. Just give me the card if you want to give me money off stuff.
Sign me up.
It's absolutely fine."
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Ladies and gentlemen.
If you like this podcast and want to support more episodes, you can donate through Patreon. Visit patreon.com/Children of the Forest to show your support for the Forest School podcast.